Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. So I recently took my Nomadic Orcs and Goblins to a one-day, three-game event in London. If you get a chance and you're around London, check out the War in the Old World series at Bad Moon Cafe. Sid, the TO there, is doing a great job running these one-day events. We were playing version 1.5 using the matched play guide. And what I wanted to do in this video was go through some of the scenarios, particularly around the secondary objectives, to do a bit of analysis on how it affected the gameplay. What I'm not going to do is a sort of general review of the whole match play guide and go through the missions one by one. There's a lot of reviews online already, and I think it's more valuable for you guys if I just talk about the games that I played and my experiences and how I think this works for matched play, right, for competitive events. So game one was against Adam's High Elves, and I'll go through my game a little bit after I've analysed the scenario. So it's upon the field of glory. So you've got your typical battle line, pitched battle deployment, 12 inches on across the length of the board. We were playing the baggage trains, strategic locations 3, domination, and special features secondary objectives. So 4 secondary objectives all at once for our first game of 1.5. So it was a little bit slow to begin with, especially the deployment phase, but then things started to speed up as we got used to how all the scoring goes. So we've got these 3 objectives in the center of the board, right? And this strategic locations would be quite consequential to the way the game is played. We've also got this special feature, which is slap bang in the middle of the board. Now, it does say in the book that your strategic locations must go down on the table and you're supposed to move terrain out the way to make sure you've got your strategic location in the place that it's supposed to be. However, it also says the special feature should be in the center of the table and that it doesn't move, right? So there's a little bit of a conflict there. Obviously, this conflict can easily be sidestepped simply by the TO playing either no strategic locations or the strategic locations 2 or 4 missions, because those missions don't actually have a strategic location in the center of the table, so it's more compatible with the special feature secondary. However, in this game, because we weren't sure what to do, we just played the central objective as a special feature and a strategic location, which means it's giving up VPs during the game, and it's a chunk of VPs at the end of the game as well. So we've got these 3 strategic locations in the center, and this is really the main secondary that is affecting how the game is played, because each location is worth 30 VPs if you're controlling it with one of your core units of unit strength 10 or more at the end of each player turn. So there's 90 VPs up for grabs on each player turn. Across 12 player turns is 1,080 or something like that. Over 1,000 VPs up for grabs across the game. So even if you only get half of them, that's like an extra 500 VPs, right? So this is a massive objective, more consequential, at least in terms of the number of victory points that they give up, than any of the other secondaries, and you can start scoring them from turn 1. So this really affects the way the game is played. So if we zoom in here a little bit and we've got our sort of blue squares here representing our units, what we want to do is sort of start taking these objectives from the first turn. And so what you're likely to see with this scenario, and what you're about to see happened in my scenario, is that you might have units that are pushing up to try and take that central objective straight away. Now, if you're playing with a special feature as a piece of impassable terrain, then simply you're going as close as possible up to that impassable terrain, and then you've got to be either the nearest unit, and obviously if those 2 units are equally close, then it's the unit with the highest unit strength. So you could have an infantry block like this, which is just pushed up, so its corner is sort of touching the impassable terrain there, and therefore you're as close as you possibly can be to the center of the table, or to the feature, right? Not necessarily to the center of the table, because in this diagram I'm in the corner of that special feature, because I don't want to be just having my infantry block facing a piece of impassable terrain, right? I want to be able to go around it. But then it's quite likely that your opponent's going to do the same thing on the other side of the table, and it will just be a matter of which unit has the higher unit strength as to which one is going to get the special abilities. And the special feature could give up Unbreakable, Special Rule, Magic Res 3, or Hatred, which can all be very useful, as I'm sure you can imagine. Cavalry are also really good. And so in this example here, you could have a cavalry unit that could actually come forward right into the opponent's half of the board on turn 1. And in this case, you'll be within range of taking more than one objective. You can be the closest to the special feature and possibly the objective on the right or left, depending on which way you're going. The ability that you get from the special feature lasts until the end of your turn. So you could move up there, take the special feature, and if you're still holding that special feature, if you're still the unit with the largest unit strength close to that special feature at the end of your opponent's turn, then you could pick up, say, the hatred special rule and then charge away from that special feature. And then even though you're no longer within 6 inches of it, you will keep that hatred roll to the end of your turn. So it's worth remembering, good to pick up that ability, even if you don't plan on sticking around. If you do plan on sticking around, though, it's even better, right? Because Magic Res 3 and Unbreakable could make an infantry unit or cavalry or whatever even more tanky and able just to sit on that objective for the whole of the game. So let's see how I did in Game 1 versus the High Elves.
So the Manji Marauders are back for a bit of 1.5 action. It's still the same playstyle to the Armies, so I've still got that big unit of Boar Boy Biggins, supported by the Warboss on Wyvern and loads of chariots. The main difference, I suppose, to do with 1.5 and to do with the fact they're playing these objectives is that I've dropped the pump wagons and I've changed around some of the magic items on the boards to try and squeeze in a couple of units of 5 Goblin Wolf Riders. Now they are impetuous, they might just go charging off when I don't want them to, but of course they are movement 9, swift stride, they can go in marching column for a whopping 27 inches, and they can go and take objectives here and there when I might need them, and they do have cavalry spears, so who knows, they might be able to charge off a lone unit and kill it from time to time. The Boar Boys, I've switched up the magic items, so instead of the big red raggedy flag that I normally take, I've gone for that angry lad's flag, which means my massive unit of Boar Boys is frenzied. Now, they've changed the rules to frenzy in this edition. It's a subtle change, but it used to say in the rulebook that the mount could never get frenzy. Frenzy is just the rider and not the mount. And now it just says that if the mount has it, the rider doesn't get it. If the rider has it, the mount doesn't get it. But many of the magic items just give frenzy to the unit, right? So if they're giving frenzy to the unit, that kind of implies that it's the mount and the rider. And I did check with the TO before the game, and it seems like it was okay for my Orcs and the Boars to get +1 attack for frenzy. So that's going to make my Boar Boys unit have a very healthy amount of output when they're on the charge, because they're going to get the +1 attack for frenzy, +1 attack for furious charge, and the Boars are going to get +1 attack as well. So it's going to put out a massive shed load of strength 6 attacks even when they get the charge. Because they're frenzied, of course, it means I can drop the thinking hat, and I've replaced that with the Collar of Zorga. Now, the Collar of Zorga is a little tasty magic item, which I think you're going to see a lot of, particularly if you're playing a big unit, which is -1 to hit from the mounts, right? So if you get charged by cavalry or a mounted monster, the actual monster or the cavalry are going to get -1 to hit. Now, in terms of magic, I've still gone very magic heavy, despite the nerfs to magic in this edition. Now, Adder, the Weird Knob, is a level 3. He's got 2 power scrolls in the lore familiar, right? So he's choosing his spells on battle magic, and actually they're very healthy cast values already, because Oaken Shield is a 7, Arcane Urgency is a 9. Those are the 2 spells I want, really. Hammer Hand as well, which is quite easy to cast, and he's got +3 to cast, because of course within a big unit of Orcs he gets +3, so he's already got an advantage against the enemy level 4 that might be trying to dispel him. Festus the Goblin Odd Knob is a level 4, he's rolling his spells on the Lore of the Waaagh, and I've given him the Staff of Badum. Now the Staff of Badum gives you +D3 to cast on every casting roll, which is just an absolutely fantastic item. Now previously I wouldn't look at this item because I could take the Idol of Gorg. Now the Idol of Gorg gives you an extra 3-inch range on your spells and a reroll once per turn. Now if he's a level 4, you know, most of the spells he's getting off very easily. If it's at 9 to cast, he's getting it on a 5 on 2d6, and he's got a once per turn reroll. So he normally got off all of his spells per each turn anyway. But now with only +2 to cast for level 4, he needs a bit of extra oomph if he wants to get off all of his spells on the Lore of the Waaagh each turn. So I've taken the Staff of Badum. If you roll a double 1 or a double 6 with the staff, it explodes with a big template strength 6 hits, which is pretty nasty, especially if you're in like a unit of Goblins or a unit of Orcs. He's going to be wandering around on his own. He will be near the Boars and near the Wolf Riders, so he will kill things if the staff explodes. But fortunately, in this one-day event, the staff didn't explode. So despite rolling a double 6 for a couple of my dispels, as you'll see in the last game. But fortunately, I didn't roll it for Festus and get the staff to explode. But other than that, the list is the same. So there's 4 Goblin Wolf Chariots and 3 Orc Boar Chariots. Game 1, I was up against Adam's High Elves. He had a Prince on Star Dragon with the Spell Eater Axe, the Armour of Calidor and Pure of Heart, level 3 Archmage on Elementalism with the Ruby Ring and Pure of Heart. Now he's on a steed, and he's actually outside the Silver Helms, when I thought he would sort of join the Silver Helms, because I think there was 9 in the unit, so I'm expecting the Archmage to go in there, but he decided to mill around with the infantry by himself. 9 Silver Helms with the Hammerhand item, 24 Sea Guard with the Razor Standard, 18 Phoenix Guard, 10 White Lions, and 2 Great Eagles. Now, in each of my games across this event, I had more drops than my opponents, so I could react to their deployment quite well. We're playing the Field of Glory with the 3 objectives in the middle, as I've just described. Now, the High Elf infantry were all deployed sort of on my right side, quite central. The cavalry on the left side and the dragon sort of in the centre left on top of the hill, as you can see in the pictures. I rolled a 6 for first turn and just moved up super aggressive on my right hand side with everything, right? Just putting max pressure on that infantry with my boar boys. Now, those infantry are out of range to charge me, and I'm in easy range to charge them, which is, of course, the big advantage with cavalry versus infantry matchups. And I've got all my chariots lined up as well with various distances. So, you know, if he wants to come up close, everything's going to hit him at once. If he wants to stay back, then something's going to hit him. So, meanwhile, my goblins are in marching column and they shoot up the left-hand side. So I actually end up taking all 3 of the strategic locations right off the bat in turn 1. I pick up the Magic Res 3 ability from the special feature in the middle. Now on High Elves turn 1, the Sea Guard and the Phoenix Guard sort of re-maneuver to take the charge and sort of deny the impact hits that I would be getting from all my boar boys. The Sea Guard moving in very, very close to my boars, so they would still get their stand and shoot, and of course they've got this ability where they can drill out and stand and shoot at the same time, they can, because of their elven reflexes and their high initiative, they'd actually be able to strike simultaneously with my boar boys because they're very close to me, so I wouldn't get my max initiative buff, and they, obviously being elves, get that +1 initiative. So they re-maneuver in a way to sort of take the charge. They're also slightly closer to the special feature than my boar boys now. Sorry, I don't have a picture of this. And so they end up picking the getting the ability from the special feature as well. And unfortunately, there isn't an ability to give you immune to psychology, and the unbreakable rule, which you can pick up from the special feature, doesn't give you immune to psych anymore in this edition, which is a bit unfortunate because obviously what happened on my turn, Rob on his Wyvern terror checked the Sea Guard and they failed because they were no longer in range of the dragon. Now the dragon on High Elves turn 1 chose not to join the main fight on the right hand side and instead chased the goblins off the objective on the left. Now that's great obviously in terms of the mission, but really what the infantry needed was the support of the High Elf general, and so the Sea Guard take flight. It's up to me now to try and chase them. Now I can't chase them straight away because they flee through the High Elf units and are sort of fleeing on the back board edge there, hoping that they rally on the next turn. But Rob on his Wyvern just flies over into the White Lions instead. The boars charge the Phoenix Guard along with some chariots. Not all the chariots made it in because they failed their fear test against the Phoenix Guard. Always struck me as strange how the Phoenix Guard calls fear, but it's enough to deter some of these goblin chariots from going in. But look, the weight of the boars going in on the now smaller units without the Sea Guard to support them precipitated in the collapse of the right flank of the High Elves, or their left flank, my right flank. On the left side, I managed to keep his knights and his dragon busy for a few turns with the chariots. One of the highlights being my 5 lowly goblin wolf riders in the middle, charging into his Archmage and taking her down with 5 goblin wolf riders taking down an Archmage. That was a big hurrah moment in the game there. So it felt like quite a big win in the end for the Orcs and Goblins, but I didn't touch his dragon, nor did I touch his baggage train, and we actually forgot completely about the domination objective, so it finished at 15-5 to the Orcs.
Game 2, and we were playing drawn battle lines, and I was up against Richard's Tomb Kings. The secondary objectives we were playing was Strategic Locations 3, which is actually the must-have secondary objective for this scenario, and we're also playing with Baggage Trains and Domination. Now, the Strategic Locations 3, as I said so before, I think you're going to see a lot of this secondary, because of the 3 central objectives just make it a great scenario for forcing each army to come out of their deployment zone in order to try and take these objectives that are on the center line. However, in this scenario, the deployment is skewed, as you can see in the picture, right? So if we imagine we're in deployment zone B here, we can get quite far up the board on one side and not very far up the board on the other side. We're also playing with the Domination secondary, and we played in that in the match before, but I haven't really gone into the detail yet. So what this means is that each table quarter gives up VPs at the end of the game, right? And it's 200 VPs for an uncontested quarter and 100 or 150 VPs for a contested quarter, depending on by how much unit strength you're taking that table quarter by. And it's not just core units, right? So all of your units are eligible to take the table quarters at the end of the game. Now, what I think this does is it really puts a lot of value on going second, because in that last turn of the game, you can move units into a certain table quarter, and you know that your opponent's not going to have another turn to charge you or to cast spells at you or whatever, and so you can just have a think about what units you want in which table quarter. So I think there's a big argument for going second when you're playing the Domination secondary. However, if you're playing with Strategic Locations, then of course you might want to go first, so you can push up and take those locations and start scoring VPs early on. So you've got to think about it. So let's have a little zoom in here. So imagine we've got our battle line here in deployment zone B. With these 3 strategic locations, as you can see, one of the objectives on the left-hand side there is actually super close to our deployment zone, and you could deploy a core unit within 6 inches of that objective right off the bat. So you've got start getting VP straight away, even if you're just staying within your deployment zone. However, you might want to move out, obviously, and sit on the objective a little bit more squarely. You might even want to rush some cavalry or whatever you've got into the center of the board as well to take that objective, right? So if you get a first turn on this mission, you're quite likely to be able to rush out and take 2 objectives. Unlike the previous scenario, the Upon the Field of Glory, where you could rush out and take all 3, it's going to be more tricky to take that objective on the right-hand side because that's very near your opponent's deployment zone. So you've got 2 of the objectives which are already being controlled by one of the armies, and then that central objective which you're going to have to fight over. Now, because of the Domination, this scenario, I think, does give some scope for a defensive strategy, right? Because if you imagine because of the skewed deployment zone, you're actually able to contest 3 table quarters without much movement, right? So you could sort of, as I've done in the picture there, just sort of skew your battle line a bit, and you can stick a core unit in the top left and bottom right table quarters. And assuming you've got enough core units there, you could play quite a defensive strategy where you're defending that corner of the board. And obviously, for most people, the decision to be aggressive or be defensive is decided at the list building phase. But I think it's good. What makes a good tournament, in my opinion, is one which doesn't favor one type of army particularly. So if every single mission you had to come out of your deployment zone and grab objectives in order to win it, then only the front foot aggressive armies would be competitive in that kind of event. And I think it's good that there are some events in which a more defensive army has a chance of winning the objectives. Okay, so let's see how I did against the Tomb Kings.
So game 2 against Richard's Tomb Kings. Now there's no big dragon in this list. It's the Uber Death Star list, right? So he's got a level 4 in Elementalism with the Earthing Rod and a Ruby Ring. There's a level 1 on Illusion. There's a Necrotect with the Wizarding Hat. There's a Herald on Chariot with the Armour of Destiny and the Icon of the Sacred Eye. And there's a Tomb King with the Ogre Blade and the Armour of Meteoric Iron. Now all 6 of those characters, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those characters, 6, because there's another Prince with a Great Weapon and 2 Lodestones, right? So there's 6 characters in a big block of 29 Tomb Guard. So that's the Uber Death Star brick you can see in the picture. There's 14 Skeleton Archers, 3 Ushabti, 4 Ushabti, and a Casket of Souls. So it's quite a small, compact army. They're all the characters in that one unit. Now, obviously, I'm running a kind of Death Star army as well, right? And so I quite fancied charging in there, slaughtering a load of skeletons, and then seeing what happens on the crumble, right? Assuming I win the combat. But ideally, I want to go into that unit at the same time as I'm charging in with my Wyvern or a bunch of chariots, and to really put the maximum twist on the screw of his Death Star, right? To make sure I can actually collect the points from it. And Richard played the game very well. He's sort of castling up in the corner there, as you can see, which perhaps isn't the best strategy for the mission, which I'll come on to in a second. But he manages to move his Death Star up on the first turn to just within 16 inches of my board boys, of course, and that's baiting them out now because they're frenzied. They have to declare a charge. And he also slaps down the template from Elementalism, the name escapes me now, Elemental Spirits, that's the one, meaning it's harder for my boar boys to complete the charge as well. Now, I do have the Warband rule, but I fail my first turn charge, and everything else sort of moves up around the sides, as you can see in the picture. Now, this is good for me in terms of taking objectives and trying to secure these table quarters for the domination objective, but I'm going to have to time it well so that I can charge this unit and get a multi-charge on this big block if I'm going to crack that nut. Meanwhile, there's 7 Bo-Shabti shooting at me, and of course the Casket of Souls. Now, on turn 2, I think it is, he tries to bait out another charge, and I end up making that charge. Now, I thought I was going to fail that charge, and therefore didn't declare at the same time with the Wyvern. The Wyvern instead went into the Bo-Shabti on the hill, and then my Orc Chariot that also declared a charge failed the charge. And so I make it with my Death Star against his Death Star, but I don't have any of my supporting units going in at the same time. And then to cut a long story short, my boar boys bounce off this massive brick of skeletons. He's just got a lot of characters in there, and although I slaughtered loads of the Tomb Guard, because there's so many characters in the front rank, you know, with great weapons and such, he still manages to slaughter he still gets a lot of attacks back, and I lose a lot of my boar boys in that fight, and I think I narrowly win combat, but it kind of feels like a loss because obviously his skeletons come back to life. He's still got all his characters in the front. I'm losing loads of boar boys, and I know in the next round of combat I won't be able to have all of my charge bonuses, which the boar boys rely on. I've also don't have loads of chariots and wyverns and whatever coming in on the second round of combat because everything is now tied up fighting other units, or has been shot off the board by the Bo-Shabti. So in the next round of combat, while my Wyvern is going to town on the Bo-Shabti on the hill, I end up losing combat in the centre and my boar boys flee away. They're not completely destroyed, they're under 25% strength, and so Richard will be collecting half points for that unit, but they can get away and then sort of move into marching column and flee away from the scene. Because of all of the intricate dice rolling in our big combat in the middle, we only end up getting 3 turns done. So we ended up, not playing quick enough with all the objectives and so on. It finishes a 10-10 draw in the end, although I'm down on kill points because I've taken more of the objectives and I managed to pick up more of the table quarters by the end. I can claw back a lot of those points from the objectives, so it finishes a 10-10 draw. At lunchtime, there were some lovely armies on display to see. Many undead armies in the building. We were, of course, playing with the second regen, which, of course, for those of you who don't know, the rules to regen have been reworded to now mean whenever you lose a wound, right? So for things that would make sense, right? If you take a dangerous terrain test and you would die, you would get a regen save on that. If you suffer a multi-wounds hit, you now take regen on each of the multi-wounds rather than just once and then suffering the multi-wounds. But what it means is in combat is that if you kill a load of skeletons and they take all their regens and they lose combat and then they crumble from the losing combat, they then get a second round of regens. to see how many will crumble, which is quite a big advantage, I think, particularly in the mission-based, objective-based play where you're going to have sort of blocks of skeletons trying to take objectives. So there were lots of undead armies in the building, and obviously I'm not trying to criticize individuals for taking undead. I'm sure people just take the army that they want to take or the army that they have, but it was interesting to see all of these Tomb Kings and Vampire Counts armies and how well they excelled at the event. There was also a Cathay army on display. One of the chaps there has a 3D printing business and was able to print and paint a Cathay army right for the sort of first tournament after their release, which was very good effort. I don't know how it got on. I'm going to reserve my judgment of Cathay for now. I know lots of people have done videos describing the book and how powerful or not so powerful it is. So I'll wait till I've played a few games against the Cathay to have my judgment on that. But a very nice selection of armies on display. And I was the only Orc and Goblins army at the event, representing the Waaagh.
So it's game 3, and I was matched up against JJ's Vampire Counts. We're playing a Chance Encounter. Now, this has got the really funky deployment zone in which there's 4 quarters, but with this 18-inch diameter circle in the middle where there's a special feature, right? So the special feature is the must-have secondary objective for this scenario. We were also playing with Strategic Locations 4, and it's funny because I hadn't actually read the match play guide properly before this event because it only came out on the day of the event. But then after reading the match play guide afterwards, I realized that you're not actually supposed to have strategic locations with this scenario, right? But we were playing them all at once. I guess the TO wanted to make sure that we all got a full flavor of the match play guide. So we're playing with another 4 secondaries in one game, right? So we've got the 4 strategic locations, none of which are in the center, but we've also got the special feature, which is slap bang in the middle, right? So this produces quite a congested board. Obviously, it depends when you're placing the terrain, what terrain goes where, and it depends on what kind of impassable feature you're using in the center of the table. But assuming it's like a building or a ruin or something, that's going to take up a lot of that 18-inch diameter circle in the middle. And then that's going to, because of the way that you deploy in one quarter and your opponent is deploying in the opposite quarter, that can create quite a bit of congestion. I mean, whenever you've got a piece of terrain slap bang in the middle of the table, it changes the game of Warhammer because it kind of divides the game, divides the board into 2 halves, right? So we've got the strategic locations. Now, in the game I played, as you're about to see, I deployed in deployment zone B2 at the bottom there, and my opponent was in B1 at the top left. Now, what this means is there's 2 of these strategic locations which you can just sit on from the start, and there's 2 that your opponent can sit on from the start. However, because you've got your baggage train at the back and you've got these objectives either side, you don't want to be deploying your army all on one side of your quarter. I mean, there's not that much space anyway because you're only in a quarter of the board, or less than a quarter of the board. But you want to sort of be thinking, I'm going to go around both sides of this special feature, or at least defend both sides of that special feature, because obviously your opponent can come around either side and get into your backfield. The special feature in the middle is very, very close to your deployment as well. So you can deploy, obviously it depends how big that special feature is, but you could deploy within 6 inches of it. So you just need your biggest unit strength core unit to be, within touching distance of it to make sure you can get that ability if that's what you need. We're playing domination again, so at the end there's even more victory points up for grabs for taking the table quarters at the end, and we're playing with baggage trains. Right now, I think in this scenario, let's talk about baggage trains a little bit. The other 2 games that I played, the baggage trains didn't play any part in the game really. Games were a bit slow because we were still getting used to the new rules and the new scenarios, so we didn't get all 6 turns completed in each of those games. So perhaps the baggage trains would have come into it in the late game if we'd gone up to 6 turns. But I think this one, you can actually defend your baggage train a little bit better because you're only deploying all in one quarter. It sort of allows you to sort of cluster around and really have your baggage train defended. Watch out for those ambushes though, of course. Now, as with many of the missions, especially when you're playing these strategic locations, you want to be scoring right from the off. And so you want your core units to be pushing up, right? I think that's a good thing for the game generally, right? To have core units moving forward instead of sitting back. But in this one, you can actually be pretty aggressive because there's an 18-inch diameter circle in the middle there. But if you look at where that deployment zone is for the enemy, again, depending on how big that special feature is, you're less than 18 inches away from your enemy if they deploy on the line and you deploy on the line. So in this example here, because your deployment zone has this funny shape, you can sort of angle your unit. I mean, if you look at my blue square in the middle there at the top, it's kind of at an angle facing the opponent's deployment zone, so that I can move through and just go around and hug the corner of that special feature. And as you're about to see in my game against the Vampire Counts, I actually got a turn 1 charge simply by putting my unit, I didn't go first, but simply by putting my unit within touching distance of, on the line, ready to go. You're so close to the enemy in this chance encounter that you've really got to think about, are they going to charge me turn 1? Do I want to charge turn 1? Do I want to hang back? Do I want to get this special feature? Is it worth it? Because, you can get that special feature and still kind of hide behind it, or you can try and just go straight on the diagonal to push forward, right? So you've got your baggage train at the back there. I might want to move, hug the terrain, and come round. And so it actually allows quite an aggressive strategy for this, but also quite defensive because you're in that table corner. You could hang back, assuming you're not playing with the strategic locations, which I suppose technically we shouldn't be for this mission. You can hang back in the corner, defend your baggage train, and then, if the enemy sweeps round both sides, you've still got quite a defensive position in the corner. So what do I think about these secondary objectives overall? I think the strategic locations is massively consequential for each game in which it's included. There's loads of VPs up for grabs, especially the strategic locations 3 and 4, where it's forcing you to come out of your deployment zone in order to grab those objectives right from turn 1. That really changes the game, and it forces you to play a different way. So it's a fantastic scenario, but I think it's a lot and it changes the game quite a lot. I don't think it's good to have it in all 5 games over a weekend. I think if you've got it in 2 or 3 games, that's great, but I don't think it needs to be in all 5 games. Similarly, the domination one, there's a load of VPs up for grabs for that, potentially 800 VPs, and it also particularly favours whoever goes second and whoever has fast units, because you don't even need core units to take the table quarters, right? So if you've got flyers still alive at the end of the game and you're going second, you can just come on and take table quarters, or your ambushers can come on turn 5 and take table quarters. And so I think that massively changes things. And again, I would say it doesn't need to be in all 5 games over a weekend. Maybe just 1 or 2, or potentially 3 over the weekend would be the sweet spot. Baggage trains doesn't make too much of a difference. I think it's good that you need unit strength 5 to attack them, because then you don't have these very small a flying eagle or a light chariot or whatever coming in and sacking them off. So, baggage trains you can have jointly with other secondaries in multiple scenarios. Again, the special feature as well isn't too consequential on its own in terms of the effects that it gives and the number of VPs that it gives up. However, I think having a piece of terrain, a big piece of impassable terrain, slap bang in the middle of the table, changes the game also in a way which I wouldn't want to see that in every game of Warhammer, right? So I think, again, 1 or 2 times over the weekend to have a special feature. And so I think over a 5-game event, what I'd like to see is just 1 or 2 secondaries in each game rather than 3 or 4. And I think that might be quicker to play as well, easier to understand, but also not change the game in a massive way so that you think that you're having to just play the scenarios in every game, that you're still able to sort of play your game, which might not be playing aggressively to get the locations or playing the movement game for domination. In terms of the changes to 1.5 edition, everything worked quite smoothly. You've already heard me talk a little bit about the regen and some of the issues there. I think that infantry are in a much better place now, and in terms of the objectives, they might not get there on turn 1, which is kind of what you want. So there's still a big case for cavalry, particularly core cavalry, that can come forward and score. But infantry are good at sitting on the objectives if you want to just move there onto a strategic location and sit there and be able to hold that objective. But there's still a massive place for cavalry, because late game where you want to get table quarters, or turn one early game where you want to jump forward and grab an objective. I mean, I had fantastic success simply with 5 Goblin Wolf Riders in turn one or marching columns, simply just shooting up to an objective, and then when something charges them, they run away again. Just allows you to grab some extra VPs, and which might not have been available to you if I had a more infantry-based army. So I think that there's still a massive place for core cavalry, and I think we're going to see more strong units, more big units, perhaps even more Death Stars, things like Chaos Knights, and of course the Orc Boar Boy Biggins. Who doesn't love the Boar Boy Biggins? Let's see how we do in the third game versus the Vampire Counts.
Game 3, and it's against JJ's Vampire Count, so it's undead again. It's a level 4 Necromancer on Mortis Engine. There's a Strigoi Ghoul King on foot with the Ogre Blade, and he'll be flying around later, of course, with the Spectral Steed. There's 2 Tomb Banshees. There's a White Lord BSB with the Helm of Commandment, 13 Ghouls, 20 Graveguard with great weapons and the Dragonhof banner, another unit of 28 Skeletons, 3 Fellbaits, 6 Hex Wraiths, and a Black Coach. My first time playing against a Black Coach, I didn't know what it does, so I was asking lots of questions. It seems like a pretty handy piece of kit, and it's one of the first units that I come across in this battle, as you're about to see. So, first, on this scenario, I didn't like the deployment at all. As you can see in the picture, it produces armies that are very clustered up in one quarter of the board, and obviously with a fast-moving army like the Nomadic Waaagh, I want to be able to deploy quite wide and use my speed to get around my opponent. And this, with a very cluttered board as well, because you've got the special feature in the middle, which is a massive piece of impassable. It's producing a game which feels very congested. However, I deploy my boar boys sort of on the line, as you can see, sort of pointing towards his nearest unit, which is a big block of skeletons. And what happens is, early on in the game, is that he moves his Black Coach up and in front of the skeletons, baiting my boar boys into a frenzied charge into it. Now, of course, it goes ethereal, and I know I can't touch that Black Coach because I don't have any magic weapons in my whole army at all. But my boar boys do have a healthy static combat res, so I've deployed them with 2 extra ranks, which seemed like I needed leadership 10 for this matchup, because obviously the Necromancer's got the screams and so on. So I've deployed them with 2 ranks. So I've got +2 for the ranks. I've got 2 banners in the unit, so that's 4. I could call a Waaagh and give me an extra one for 5. And that's exactly what I do, right? So I call a Waaagh, I go in big, hoping to pop the Black Coach on the combat res. However, it gets a wound on me. Oh, sorry, I've got close order as well, so I would have 6 static combat res. So it does lose by 5, enough to take all of its wounds. But JJ picks up the dice for the second regen and makes one of them. And then the Black Coach is left on 1 wound. And then, of course, on the undead turn, he can then raise the rest of its wounds so it comes back up to full strength again. And I think, uh-oh. And at that point, I thought, I'm going to lose this game now, because my boar boys are going to be stuck in combat with this Black Coach, and we're not going to be able to get out. We're just going to be stuck there. And then he's going to be able to pick me off, you know, get his characters into the side or scream me to death or whatever. But fortunately, the congestion of the table ends up working in my favour. Now, turn 2 comes around, and I end up winning combat against the Black Coach and popping it. So he fails his regen, and the Black Coach pops because I've still got my static combat res of 6, and I'm able to go straight through it and then charge into the skeletons behind it. And by that time, I've got my Wyvern up in support, who's also charged up into the skeletons. And because of my frenzy, because of my hideous amount of attacks that I'm putting on the charge, combined with the War Boss on Wyvern, I'm able to delete a unit of 28 skeletons in 1 charge. Meanwhile, on my left side, we've baited those Hex Wraiths to come up. I actually got a turn 1 charge with my Orc Chariot on the left side there, on his Fellbats, and then the Hex Wraiths are coming up. And I'm just trying to hold that objective with my Goblin Wolf Riders for as long as possible, while my Boars and my Wyvern are going around that right-hand side. And then I just get this cascading effect where I go through the skeletons, and then I carry on into his Mortis Engine, and his characters evade out of the way, So my war boss goes into one of the banshees, but my boar boys end up crashing into the mortis engine behind it. The graveguard join the fight, but perhaps a bit unwisely, because I just end up slaughtering everything on that right-hand side as the boar boys just crash through pretty much his whole army on the right-hand side. So his hex wraiths and some of the ghouls survive the fight, but it's been pretty devastating on the right-hand side. Then after his Strigoi Ghoul King dies, then things start crumbling and things start going hideously wrong for the vampire counts. Some of the highlights in the game, I rolled a couple of double sixes on the trot for dispels to stop him from getting off some of the nasty necromancy spells, and I also rolled a double one for my Hand of Gorgon the Wyvern, which, if you don't know, you roll a double one, he gets a bad landing and suffers a wound, which is a double kick in the teeth, because double one obviously means he can only move 2 inches, and then he suffers a wound as well. So that was a bit annoying. But it turns out to be a big win for the Orcs and Goblins. It's a 19-1. And so after the 2 wins and a draw, I'm actually thinking I might be in a chance here for a podium position at the end of the one-day event at Bad Moon Cafe. So all in all, I came second out of 18 players, which I'm very happy with. I didn't have the pleasure of fighting either of the Tomb King armies that came first and third. They were both royal host lists, and it would have been, perhaps in a 5-day event, it would have been my next opponent on round 4, so that will have to wait for another day. But very pleased about how the army performed in this 1.5 edition, especially as lots of people running infantry blocks. I've still got my all-mounted Nomadic Waaagh, which worked very well so far. The second regen was, I take the mick every time anyone picks up the dice for the second regen, as I sort of, the rules are the rules, and the TO ruled in that way. I don't think it's supposed to be like that. I don't think Games Workshop designed it like that, but that is what the rules say, especially as they've taken out that previous FAQ which ruled against it. But I always try and sort of guilt people as soon as they pick up the dice for the second regen. It's like, oh yeah, you're taking the second regen then, are you? Go on then, roll your dice, just to take the mick a bit. But I obviously made use of some of the rule changes, particularly with Frenzy. Frenzy wasn't a massive problem for me. Obviously, in some games, you've got to be careful with the Frenzy because you're forced to charge and you're forced to overrun. It can be a bit tricky. It's not so bad in this edition, because after you overrun or after you pursue an enemy and catch them, you can then test to reform. So in previous editions, when you overrun, you'd still be facing in a direction you didn't want to face. But now, while you still do have to overrun, you can then test to reform and face the direction you want to face, which is great. And so I think that won't be the last time I take the Frenzied Boar Boys. I do think the Terror test, though, one of the main reasons I take Frenzy on the Boar Boys is to stop them from fleeing on a terror check, right? Because if you've got one big unit and then you're forced to take a terror test and you fail it, Leadership 9, Leadership 10, you will fail a terror test from time to time. It can just mean the end of the game like that, and you can't re-roll a terror test unless you've got the veteran ability, which Orcs and Goblins don't have access to. You cannot re-roll a terror test, and so it is a massive risk if you've got a big unit which is not immune to psychology. So that's kind of one of the main reasons I take it. I do think, though, that if I was running a tournament, a little house rule, I would sort of treat terror as a panic test, and so allow people to re-roll it if they get access to a re-rolls on panic. And that happened obviously in my game 1 against the High Elves, where he failed a crucial terror test, and I was like, gosh, I don't want that to happen. I didn't want that to happen. I wanted to charge that unit and it would be more of an exciting game. But instead, I just declare the charge and they run away, and it's like, uh-oh, this is going to go my way pretty quickly. Anyway, those are my 2 cents. Hope you've enjoyed it, guys. Hope you've enjoyed my diagrams about some of the missions. Next event I do, hopefully it's different missions. We'll have some more analysis on that. Hit like and subscribe as usual, guys, and I'll catch you on the next one. Goodbye.